Hello, today I'd like to look at sea level rise and urban management. And so, the cause of sea level rise, probably the biggest cause, is climate change. And so, the driving force of climate change is the amount of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. As you can see by these graphs, the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere has gone up exponentially in the most recent years. You can see through our graphs going back through a few hundred years that it started slowly going up, but now it's got a big spike, like what an exponential graph looks like. And this is showing probably the biggest driving factor of climate change, where these gases build up more and more and more in our atmosphere, causing heat to get trapped, which will then warm the sea waters, causing them to expand and rise, but also it will cause glaciers to melt, thereby melting the ice, adding more water into our system, and causing sea levels to rise even more, which is not a good thing, because as we have started to see, the land is getting taken back by the sea bit by bit with this sea level rise, but it's also seeing this change in our ecosystem with the ocean. Whereas with carbon dioxide or lots of greenhouse gases being entered into the atmosphere is causing rainwaters to get more acidic, which kill off coral reefs and disturb wildlife and potentially kill off wildlife if it gets too acidic. But also, it then will cause a myriad of different weather changes to happen, such as with warming waters, it might produce more hurricanes, typhoons all around the world. And that is, again, a scary possibility. As you can see by this little graphic that I have, you can see just what a few degrees of warming can do to our Earth. You'll see the typhoons, different weather changes, you'll see extinction of species, and much, much more. So this is a serious issue that we need to be paying attention to. Now, with how things are projected to be going, it's not looking good, frankly. As you can see again by these graphs, you can see these sorts of changes and predictions with how things are going to go between 2070 and 2100. Our predictions show that the Amazon could rise 8 degrees. That would kill the Amazon, and that inherently is a big producer of oxygen for us. So again, that's not a good thing. So with this warming of the sea waters, it's going to drastically affect our climate. It's because it's a snowball effect. Once one thing happens, it just keeps building and building and building, and sea level rise is just one of those things that's going to snowball even more. I mean, even by the graph, you can see the Midwest is going to rise by maybe around 4 degrees. And if you are like me, you don't like extreme Kansas weather, because in the summer, it's already extremely hot and humid. It's only going to get worse, and in the winters, it's going to get even more cold, and even more snow is going to be dumped here. So that's going to make life here even more challenging. But you can also see by my other graph that I have a record of all the sea temperature anomalies going back hundreds of years. And so you see that before 1940, that all the sea anomalies or the temperature anomalies are in the negatives, which that's fine. It's not anything too alarming. But as you get to the other side of the graph, near the present years, you can see that the temperature anomalies have grown even more. They are well above the positives, and even in the present time, we're seeing them go to 1 degree Celsius above average, which is not good. That's showing just how much our seas are warming up, and it's showing a looming threat of sea level rise and climate change and what it's doing. So again, this is a topic that really needs to be focused on, because now going into my second topic, this is going to really affect our cities or our urban management. Now, here's why. Historically, how humans have settled their cities and towns and whatnot have been around sources of water, whether that are rivers, lakes, or even the ocean. They are founded around these bodies of water, and with sea level rise, that is threatening these cities. For instance, with New York being right on the ocean, or you see New Orleans being in the delta of the Mississippi in the Gulf of Mexico, or even with countries like the Netherlands, who's historically had their land from taking the land back from the sea, or even the Maldives, who are a collection of islands made out of atolls that are only a few feet above sea level. And so these places are being under serious threat because of this sea level rise. And so we need to look at urban management and sea level rise together, because as you can see from these photos that I've put up, that the world is going to look very different if we do not. Such as with the North American picture, you can see that Florida is completely gone. The whole eastern seaboard is underwater. Even San Francisco is submerged. And so if we want to preserve our normal way of life and preserve these cities, we have to do something to combat sea level rise. I mean, with the Maldives in 2008, they even held a climate change conference, and to highlight just the danger of it, they held the conference underwater to essentially show this is what happens if we do not combat climate change or sea level rise. And so, for them, unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to get better. It looks like the Maldives are going to go underwater, and so what they've resorted to is trying to buy out land from other countries to try and preserve their country and their people, which is very unfortunate, but this is just one of the many things where it's going to be possible that we see with sea level rise. We could see this happen more and more, so we need to stop it. And luckily, there are some ways to combat this, such as with an example as the Netherlands, with how they are reclaiming land from the sea. They're also trying to prevent the sea from taking it back. They are actively building seawalls all along the country. And these are just, again, walls that are in the sea that are going to help stop or prevent the sea level from rising and taking back the land, and to help prevent storm surges and rising tides from engulfing the sea again. And you see these being built all along the world, such as in China, where they are building wide span of sea walls, such as near Shanghai, because they have seen the effects of sea level rise and the changing climate. And in 1998, with the flood of the Yangtze River, they saw that they needed to do something to try and stop this incredible flooding from occurring, and from the seas from coming back in and trying to swallow up the land. So they're building these large swaths of seawalls, but also they're trying to make, like Shanghai, for instance, and other big cities, quote unquote sponge cities, where they're going to try and use pumping systems and try to get the water away from those areas when it's flooding, but also to try and use the water itself to try and pump it back into the communities so that they can actually use the water. But again, you can use seawalls, you can use levees, and you can use pumping systems, but there is still the fact that sea levels are going to rise. And so I feel the biggest thing that we can do to stop sea level rise is for countries and cities to curb their carbon footprint. Because as we've seen, that the greenhouse gases are some of the biggest proponents of climate change, causing the heat to get trapped in the atmosphere, to then heating up the world, causing sea levels to rise, glaciers to melt, again, making sea levels rise. And so if we reduce our carbon footprint, then this will hopefully curb or slow down the effects of climate change, and hopefully potentially get us back on track for where we should be. Because as you've seen in the slides that I put in first, we have been producing carbon dioxide at an exponential rate now, and we need to stop. So some ways we can are by going to solar or wind energy, or even, in my opinion, probably the best alternative for oil and coal is nuclear, because it outputs a lot of energy and there's little waste other than the radioactive material, which can be put such as in the mountain ranges, the remote mountain ranges of the world, where it won't affect wildlife or the water table, and you still get power. And by reducing the carbon footprint, it will hopefully stop climate change, or at least reduce it, which will then thereby help reduce the sea levels from rising. And so all these reasons, all these statistics that I've brought here today show just why we should care about sea level rise, especially in the context of urban management. So this is why I think we all need to do something, not as countries, not as cities, but as a human race, to try and preserve our Earth. Thank you.